위대한 우리 조국 조선민주주의 인민공화국 만세!
위대한 김정은 동지 만세!
On October 15, 2024, explosions from North Korea's military once again shattered the illusion of peace on the Korean peninsula. The Gyeonggi and Donghae highways, once symbols of reconciliation connecting the north and south, were reduced to rubble, becoming yet another casualty of rising tensions. Back in 1945, when the accidentally drawn 38th parallel was established, the destinies of North and South Korea began to take dramatically different paths. On the night of August 10, 1945, two young men, Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel, sat in a lounge, overwhelmed by a pressing order from their superiors. They had to devise a plan, within an incredibly tight time frame, to divide the Korean peninsula into surrender zones, allowing American and Soviet forces to accept Japan's surrender on opposite sides. In just 20 minutes, the now infamous 38th parallel was drawn as a military demarcation line. This arbitrary boundary, based solely on latitude and with no regard for geographical or cultural realities, crudely cut through dozens of villages, mountains, and rivers. It also sealed the fate of the people on either side, setting them on drastically different paths. On August 7, 1994, Kim Il-sung, the founding monarch of North Korea, passed away, just moments before the catastrophe he had engineered began to unfold. As the regime's grand facade crumbled, a decades-long lie was exposed in brutal clarity, leading to a famine that claimed the lives of 3 million people. North Korea, a Cold War flashpoint born from the rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union after World War II, traces its story back to the armistice negotiations over 70 years ago. In 1953, as the Korean War came to an end, Kim Il-sung, then premier of North Korea's Workers' Party cabinet, had firmly consolidated control over the military. To secure his power, he immediately began purging the pro-Chinese Jong-un faction and the pro-Soviet Soviet faction within the party. Between 1953 and 1955, Kim accused key figures of espionage and executed them, including prominent leaders of Korea's communist movement, such as Lee Sung-yeop and Pak Hon-young. He then turned on his former comrades in arms, ordering the execution of Hu Jai, Kim Tu-bong, Mu Cheong, and others. By 1967 to 1968, the final challenge to his authority, the Gapsan faction, which sought to overthrow him, was crushed with an iron fist. Kim had all opposition members executed or relegated to the fringes of power, eliminating any remaining threats to his absolute rule. After eliminating most of his political rivals, Kim Il-sung shifted his focus to economic development, not out of a sense of responsibility as a leader, but to maintain social stability. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Kim initiated a national reconstruction program. At that time, the northern half of the Korean peninsula was in ruins. Devastated by the conflict, its infrastructure and industrial facilities were all but obliterated. The war had also inflicted heavy civilian casualties, leaving various sectors grappling with severe labor shortages. North Korea's economy and society teetered on the brink of collapse. In this dire situation, Kim launched a 3-year national economic recovery plan. As part of the socialist bloc, North Korea received substantial aid from the Soviet Union and China, including food, energy, and industrial support, lifelines for a nation rebuilding from the ashes. By 1957, after 3 years of recovery, North Korea embarked on its first 5-year plan. Statistics show that in the 10 years following the war, North Korea's average annual GDP growth rate reached an astonishing 25%, the highest in the world at the time. In comparison, Japan's average annual GDP growth during the same period was just 7.1%, barely a third of North Korea's rate. In 1960, East German media hailed North Korea's economic development as the Far Eastern miracle. From 1961 to 1971, Kim Il-sung implemented his first 7-year plan, which was later extended by another 3 years. By the late 1960s, North Korea's entire 122,000 square kilometers of territory had been electrified. By the late 1970s, Thanks to the Soviet Union's supply of cheap energy, North Korea's agricultural production had been mechanized to over 70%. With the help of the Soviet Union and the Comecon, North Korea exported agricultural products to the Soviet Union at prices several times higher than market rates, while importing oil, electricity, minerals, and other industrial necessities at extremely low prices. During this greenhouse period, the Soviet Union assisted North Korea in building steel mills, power plants, refineries, and provided significant technical support, along with a total of 4.9 billion rubles in low-interest loans and free aid. During this time, North Korea was like a flower growing in a greenhouse, with the entire socialist bloc providing funding, personnel, technology, equipment, and raw materials, sustaining the country's industrial system. The benefits of rapid economic growth were clear. North Korea's GDP per capita, life expectancy, and literacy rates all saw substantial improvements. By 1970, the country's GDP per capita had risen from under $100 after the war to over $300. By 1979, North Korea had established a comprehensive social welfare system. Education, from kindergarten to university, was completely free, as was healthcare. The government also provided free living supplies to students from elementary school through university. The gap between rich and poor was minimal, and in many ways, North Korea in 1979 had become a nation close to modernization. At this point, South Korea's economic level was far behind North Korea's. Lacking resources, with an unfavorable geographic location and no industrial base, South Korea was struggling to get off the ground, relying only on a small amount of external aid. Many South Korean citizens risked their lives to travel to North Korea to reunite with relatives, hoping for better living conditions. However, the economy propped up by external aid did not enable North Korea to develop independently. Instead, it created an illusion for both the rulers and the people of the country. Beginning in 1960, North Korea gradually stopped mentioning external aid in its official propaganda. In its documentary Rebuilding Pyongyang, it completely omitted any mention of the aid from socialist countries like East Germany, the Soviet Union, or China. To reinforce this false sense of national pride and maintain the public's reverence for the leader, the North Korean government began to weave an elaborate lie. During this period, North Korea enacted the 10 Principles, a set of laws that held greater authority than the Constitution. In 1974, this imperial law, which shackled the freedom of thought, was introduced. It demanded absolute loyalty to the leader, unconditional obedience to the party's tasks, a spirit of self-sacrifice and collectivism, and the elimination of all opposing forces within society. Many social contradictions were masked by rapid economic growth, and the Kim family became the sole legitimate rulers of North Korea. The government created the so-called Baekdu mountain bloodline, mythologizing the leader and his descendants to the point that they were above all laws, including the Constitution. However, a lie is always a lie, and when lies are exposed, there is always a price to pay. That immense cost claimed the lives of 3 million people. With the dramatic changes in Eastern Europe in 1989, the Soviet Union collapsed 2 years later. The Comecon, which had supported North Korea for decades, disintegrated, and the flow of cheap energy, electricity, and goods suddenly stopped. The prices of exported goods reverted to market rates, signaling the end of an era of prosperity. For Kim Il-sung, this undoubtedly shook the legitimacy of his regime to its core. As if the economic collapse weren't enough, politically, China's diplomatic recognition of South Korea struck a massive blow to North Korea. The country gradually became a pariah on the international stage. Former comrades and allies turned their backs on Kim Il-sung, burdening the aging leader in his twilight years. The ruler who had governed North Korea for 46 years could no longer bear the weight of these challenges. On August 7, 1994, Kim Il-sung died of a sudden heart attack at his villa, at the age of 83. His son, Kim Jong-il, took control of North Korea's supreme power, though he did not immediately take on the title of leader. Instead, he adopted the title of Great Marshal. According to traditional customs, he observed 3 years of mourning for his father, leaving North Korea's highest leadership position vacant for 3 years. In 1995, just as Kim Jong-il had taken the reins of power, he faced his first major challenge: a once-in-a-century flood that devastated most of North Korea's farmland. North Korea, with its 120,000 square kilometers of territory, had less than 18% of its land arable, the lowest percentage in the world. Lacking the cheap energy and fertilizers once provided by the Comecon, and with most agricultural machinery out of order, the flood completely collapsed an agricultural sector already on the brink of disaster. According to Hwang Chong-yop, a high-ranking North Korean official who defected to South Korea, the streets of Pyongyang in 1995 were filled with the bodies of people who had died from hunger, and crimes related to food were rampant. Inside the Workers' Party, it was reported that the famine claimed the lives of 480,000 people, including 50,000 party members, 50,000 military and industrial personnel, and over 2,000 senior engineers. In a country where food was strictly rationed, even such vital technical personnel as senior engineers succumbed to hunger, revealing just how dire the food shortage in North Korea had become. According to official South Korean statistics, by the time the famine was alleviated in 1998, over 3 million people had lost their lives. In the face of such extreme hardship, the North Korean government still did everything it could to maintain its dictatorship and the cult of personality around Kim Il-sung. They spent foreign currency, which could have been used to buy food for hundreds of thousands of people, on preserving Kim Il-sung's body. The Kumsusan Memorial Palace, the mausoleum of the dictator, also became the tomb for the 3 million who lost their lives. The North Korean government referred to this period as the Arduous March. During these years, as the population continued to die from hunger, the regime still implemented a military-first policy, prioritizing the allocation of all available resources to the military. To preserve its legitimacy, the government cut off the public's access to information, strengthened the people's dependency on the state through tight control over resources and the food distribution system, and deployed secret police to monitor the population. These secret police had the authority to execute anyone who disobeyed or send them to labor camps. During this period, North Korea also strengthened many laws to tighten its control over the population. The people were divided into 3 classes: core, wavering, and hostile. The assignment of these statuses depended on an individual's family background. For the 40% of the population classified as hostile, their guilt was inherent. They were considered guilty simply because of their birth. The 10% in the court class, however, had no concerns about survival. In a country where the average person only had 700 grams of food a day, these elites still frequented upscale malls, owned luxury items unknown to the common people, and could spend tens of thousands of dollars on a single dinner, while the general population struggled to survive on food rations that were less than what a typical medieval European peasant would have had. 2000, South Korean President Kim Dae-jung sought to improve relations between the two Koreas through his Sunshine Policy, hoping to end the division of the Korean peninsula through peaceful negotiations. After 55 years of separation, the leaders of both countries held their first summit in Pyongyang and signed the North-South Joint Declaration. This was the first time since the peninsula's division that the heads of the two countries signed a historic document following a meeting. South Korea agreed to provide North Korea with unconditional economic aid, and the two nations reached agreements on cooperation in various fields such as economics and culture. However, this well-intended assistance led to chaos. With South Korea's economic aid, North Korea acquired funding to develop nuclear weapons. The money, which should have been used to improve the lives of its people and develop its economy, was instead spent on building nuclear arms. In 2006, North Korea conducted its first nuclear test, and in 2007, it made significant progress. In response, the United Nations Security Council passed several resolutions, with most countries, including China, agreeing to impose sanctions on North Korea, banning the export of military supplies and luxury goods to the country. In 2009, North Korea withdrew from the six-party talks aimed at resolving the nuclear weapons issue and resumed nuclear tests. The United Nations then expanded its arms embargo. In 2013, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 2094, banning North Korean currency from circulating internationally and expelling it from the global financial system. In the following years, the import and export of gold, coal, oil, and mineral resources were also restricted. North Korea became a complete outcast in international relations, and the entire country passively sank into a closed environment. On December 17, 2011, Kim Jong-il passed away at 8:30 a.m. from shock caused by acute myocardial infarction while traveling on a train for an inspection tour, despite his lack of military command experience. After his death, he was still hailed by North Korea's official narrative as a victorious steel general, and posthumously awarded the title of First Secretary of the Republic. Like his father, his body was preserved for eternity and placed in the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun. His birthday was designated as Bright Star Day, alongside his father's Sun Day, becoming one of the most important holidays in North Korea. This second-generation ruler, who held power in North Korea for 17 years, had $4 billion in personal assets in Luxembourg, which was likely set aside for his escape should the regime collapse, reflecting the wealth he enjoyed during his rule. Even in the face of severe international sanctions, North Korea's elite continues to indulge in luxury goods. The current leader, Kim Jong-un, owns 18 imported luxury cars, with his favorite being a Mercedes Maybach GLS 600, which costs over $200,000 globally. According to incomplete statistics, his personal assets worldwide exceed $5 billion. Of course, Kim Jong-un doesn't actually own these luxury cars. He only has 24-hour access to them, with the ownership technically belonging to the entire North Korean population. The Kim family uses businessmen based in regions like China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Russia to illegally acquire imported luxury goods and more oil. These traders use their own cargo ships under the guise of normal trade. With the help of intermediaries, they purchase luxury cars and, through transshipment via multiple ports, bypass international regulations, ultimately smuggling a range of luxury goods, including cars, into North Korea. In stark contrast, the general poverty and hunger among the North Korean population are overwhelming. In a country where the average person's food intake is less than that of a medieval European peasant, every male citizen is required to serve a grueling 10 years of military service, and females for 7 years, the longest in the world. During this time, they receive only meager wages. Most senior officers treat their soldiers as personal slaves. Many female soldiers, under the pressure of their commanding officers, are subjected to sexual assault, rape, and, in many cases, suffer from the cessation of their menstrual cycles. Lee Soyeon, who escaped North Korea, recalls that during her 10 years of service, she lived in a room with 20 other female soldiers, each receiving only a small cupboard to store their uniforms. On top of these cupboards were 2 pictures, one of Kim Il-sung, the founding leader, and the other of his son, the late Kim Jong-il, the second highest leader. The harsh training and dwindling food supplies took a heavy toll on her body. After 6 months to a year in service, due to malnutrition and immense stress, the female soldiers' periods stopped altogether. Sexual harassment was rampant in the barracks, with officers free to rape their subordinates. Additionally, the harsh forced labor and poor sanitary conditions made every lower-ranking soldier constantly think about escaping. At 28, after just finishing her military service, Lee Soyeon began her first escape journey. However, lacking experience, she was caught at the border and sent to a labor camp. A year later, she was fortunate enough to be released and set out on another attempt. This time, she successfully crossed the Tumun River, which borders China and North Korea, met with a middleman in China, and finally reached South Korea. People like her are the lucky few. During Kim Jong-un's rule, the number of people successfully escaping North Korea was only half of what it was under his father's reign. In 2023, only 196 people managed to escape North Korea and reach South Korea. The human desire for freedom remains unchanged across time. To leave the country, North Koreans often have to pay a heavy price. To date, over 10,000 workers have earned foreign currency for North Korea in the Siberian region of Russia. These workers are those who refuse to return to North Korea. Although Siberia offers nothing but endless snow and a monthly salary of less than $100, Many understand that this is the best way to escape the grip of North Korea. Freedom does not come without a cost. For those who attempt to escape the country through illegal means, they are betting their lives, the greatest gamble of all. Once one member of a family escapes, the remaining loved ones within North Korea face relentless surveillance, threats, and even imprisonment in labor camps. Moreover, the escape routes are fraught with danger. They cannot simply cross the heavily guarded, landmine-filled, and machine-gun-line demilitarized zone to reach South Korea. Despite the fact that the straight-line distance between Pyongyang and Seoul is less than 200 kilometers. To reach the land of freedom just 200 kilometers away, they must first swim across the Tumun River, which forms the border between China and North Korea. Located at the 40th parallel, the Tumun River can drop to freezing temperatures in the winter, with both banks heavily guarded by watchtowers and armed soldiers. The 800-meter-wide river is only the first step toward freedom. The Chinese government cooperates with North Korea to capture and deport these escapees. And once returned, they face torture and imprisonment. A Chinese soldier who once served on the border recalls how they would detain these unfortunate people and wait for North Korean soldiers to come for the handover. These defectors would not face punishment while in China, but once they were handed over to the North Korean soldiers, they would immediately begin to suffer beatings and threats. On one occasion, North Korean soldiers used wire to wrap around the necks of these poor souls, forcing them to march in line. He often watched their departing figures, unwilling to imagine what fate awaited them. China is a threat to North Korean defectors on their journey to freedom. Escaping from one police state to another without detection is unimaginably difficult. Despite the vast reach of the Chinese surveillance state, there are still many underground churches in China, often founded by South Korean pastors, with members including many ethnic Koreans living in China. These churches specialize in helping North Korean defectors. Many years ago, China's identification system wasn't as sophisticated as it is today, and the government surveillance methods were less developed, making it easier for North Koreans to travel like ordinary Chinese citizens. They could take trains to Yunnan, 3,000 kilometers away, then cross into Myanmar illegally and eventually make their way to Thailand by foot or bus. The Thai government would contact the South Korean embassy to arrange flights for them to South Korea. However, until they reached Thailand, they remained at risk of being arrested and deported back to North Korea. If any of their companions were caught along the way, they would have to pretend not to know them, masking all signs of fear and sorrow to avoid sharing the same fate. Later, with the help of churches, some defectors began heading to Mongolia. They would disguise themselves as South Korean tour groups to deceive Chinese authorities, traveling via various means to Shiek, a city approximately 200 kilometers from the China-Mongolia border. From there, they began a grueling journey on foot across the vast Mongolian Gobi Desert to reach Ulaanbaatar. This desolate wilderness offered no aid. Their only support was the water and food in their packs and an unyielding desire to change their fate. However, this route was fraught with danger, and many who fell along the way may have spent their final moments gazing at the pristine, unpolluted night sky. Under pressure from South Korea and the United States, the Mongolian government established refugee camps for North Korean defectors. Upon reaching Mongolia, defectors could immediately gain South Korean citizenship and were offered free flights to third countries. Compared to the perilous 5,000-kilometer journey through China to Thailand, many defectors preferred to trek on foot across the Gobi Desert. Once inside Mongolia, even being arrested meant success. They would receive a ticket to South Korea and leave behind the homeland they would rather forget. In the face of the sweeping tides of history, the fate of most North Korean defectors is tragic. In China, numerous human trafficking networks actively hunt defectors. Women handed over to these traffickers are often sold to remote rural areas in Western China as brides, while men are forced into slavery or become unwilling sources for the black market organ trade. With China's surveillance measures becoming increasingly stringent, escaping North Korea has turned into an ever more perilous undertaking. In a nation ruled by tyranny, no one is truly safe, not even the tyrants themselves. The Creator of all things, our Heavenly Father, views each of us as His beloved children. Yet, there are always those who choose to follow the devil, forsaking the peace given by the Lord and denying others the right to pursue happiness. As I wrote this article, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by how broken this world truly is. The tragic fate of these individuals stirs deep sympathy within me. History, war, geography, and culture intertwine to create the somber reality of North Korea. Though I live in a place where freedom of speech is also restricted, I still hope to be a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. Perhaps freedom only reveals its preciousness in the face of oppression. For many defectors, the perilous journey of 5,000 kilometers and the desolation of uninhabited lands are risks worth taking. Today, North Korea possesses powerful nuclear weapons, commands an army of over 1 million soldiers, and even sends troops abroad to participate in wars of aggression that have nothing to do with them. Yet, amidst these grand narratives, the individuals caught in the machinery of the regime may find only despair in their own fates. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you'll subscribe to this channel, which focuses on stories of humanity and society. If you found this content meaningful, please consider giving it a like. It helps increase YouTube's algorithmic recommendation for my channel. See you in the next video.